It was dawn over the colossal spaceport of Zenith Prime, though dawn was but a technicality. Artificial lights, radiant orbs strung high along a massive dome overhead, cycled on to emulate the gentle glow of morning sunshine. On this station, perched upon the edge of the Andromeda Passage, real sunlight never reached its steel and glass thoroughfares. Yet here, among humming air recyclers and thrumming plasma conduits, the inhabitants found a sense of home. Lucas Vance, a lean, dark-haired technician with keen gray eyes and deft hands, stepped out of his cramped bunk. The metal floor vibrated faintly beneath his boots, a sign that station reactors ran at full capacity. Lucas had been stationed on Zenith Prime for 3 years, ever since signing a contract with the Interstellar Mechanica, an engineering guild that specialized in station maintenance. Each morning, he walked through the labyrinthine corridors, checking the oxygen filters and calibrating communication arrays. For all its size and commerce, Zenith Prime required constant tinkering to keep its delicate systems from shorting out. He was young, no more than 30, with a quiet disposition that belied a lively mind. At times, he daydreamed about the broader galaxy, the majestic starfields beyond, the mysterious species traveling through. His shift typically began with a mug of steaming black coffee from Iggy's Cafe, the local eatery favored by station workers. As he sipped, he gazed out at the swirling tapestry of distant stars, imagining the wonders beyond the horizon. That particular day, though it would shape his destiny forever, started quite unremarkably. Lucas was installing a new fiber-optic control line, guiding the spool through an overhead conduit. A colleague, Rebecca Helion, a boisterous engineer with wild hair and a friendly grin, was on the next rung of the scaffolding, assisting with the installation. "Careful with that spool, Lucas," she said, her voice echoing amid the metallic corridor. "Last time, you snagged it on a corner, and we had to scrap half the wiring." He offered a wry smile and steadied his grip. "I remember. Thanks for the reminder." She chuckled softly. "They've got us working double shifts because of a big visitor today," she continued, glancing meaningfully at him. "Some bigwig from the Galactic tribunal is passing through. Whole station's on edge." Lucas nodded, though he was only half paying attention. His focus drifted to the droves of travelers far below on the promenade. Merchants hawked exotic wares, travelers hurried from shuttle gates, and maintenance drones hovered overhead like watchful mechanical gulls. He always felt a faint thrill whenever a new dignitary arrived. Perhaps, he thought, they carried news of an undiscovered star system or the birth of an alliance between far-flung worlds. By midday, he was finishing up the spool installation along the upper deck that overlooked the main causeway. Rebecca hopped down first, cradling a handful of spare parts in her arms. Lucas followed, stepping off the ladder, turning to store their tools. That was the moment when everything changed. The promenade was busier than usual, a shifting crowd of humans, reptilian traders, and tall, long-limbed aliens from the outer sectors. Among them walked a contingent of robed figures, each wearing insignias bearing the Galactic Tribunal crest, a stylized set of scales over a starburst. They moved in a stately procession, parted the gathering throngs with quiet authority, and came to a halt near the station's central plaza. At the forefront was a towering figure, easily 7 feet tall. Her skin was a deep violet, her hair a shimmering cascade of silver. She wore ornate robes of black and gold, embroidered with glyphs that marked her rank and lineage. Her posture was regal, her expression stern, her gaze fierce enough to cut through the bustle like a laser's edge. This was High Judge Seraphis, one of the tribunal's most formidable authorities. Though her face bore no wrinkles, she radiated centuries of wisdom and an aloofness that made her unapproachable. A hush spread across the promenade. On Zenith Prime, High Tribunal members rarely appeared, let alone ventured among common travelers. They typically remained in private chambers or official meeting halls. But that day, Seraphis strode with purpose, flanked by lesser judges and robed attendants. She paused to examine the station's infrastructure, pursing her lips at every sign of disrepair. In an effort to step aside for the retinue, the bustling crowd around Lucas parted abruptly, and he found himself jostled from behind. A push from an unknown traveler sent him off balance. He staggered, arms flailing, trying desperately not to fall. To his horror, his right hand brushed across something solid and warm, something draped in regal black and gold cloth. By the time Lucas realized what he had touched, it was far too late. He turned, as though in slow motion, to see High Judge Seraphis herself whip around. Her intense, violet eyes blazed with an otherworldly fury. "You dare?" she hissed, her voice carrying the resonance of thunder. "Touch me, human?" Lucas stumbled back in alarm, heart pounding so loudly he could hardly hear. The crowd drew a collective gasp, stepping further away as if terrified that the very act of brushing the High Judge's robe might invite cosmic retribution. He felt a surge of dread, a chill coursing through every fiber of his being. Rebecca, wide-eyed, whispered, "Lucas, you just laid hands on a High Judge of the Galactic Tribunal." And in that moment, a hush so profound descended upon the promenade that the hum of distant thrusters seemed deafening. Seraphis's attendants looked on with expressions ranging from shock to condemnation. High Judge Seraphis, her regal figure rigid, glared down at Lucas. He wanted to stammer an apology, to explain that it was an accident, to beg forgiveness. But the words caught in his throat. For a full, agonizing minute, no one spoke. Then Seraphis raised a long, tapered finger and declared, "According to the laws of my species, you have initiated a formal union by contact. Galactic law demands that you become my mate, or face immediate trial." Lucas's ears rang. Surely, he thought, this was some misunderstanding. Trial? Mate? This was beyond bizarre. Yet he could see no trace of humor in Seraphis's expression. Her stern gaze and the hush of her retinue attested to the severity of the situation. All eyes now fixed on Lucas, who gulped and tried to form a coherent response. I didn't. I mean, it was an accident," he stammered, voice trembling. "I didn't mean to propose." Seraphis's voice carried like a clarion. "You must answer for the trespass you have committed, whether intentional or otherwise. My species' customs are not to be trifled with." Silence gripped the promenade anew. Lucas's legs threatened to give out. A whiff of burnt metal from some overhead conduit hit his senses. He imagined the entire station spinning out of orbit, so surreal was the predicament. Marry a High Judge or face trial and possible execution. It sounded like a twisted cosmic joke. Finally, the High Judge turned to her retinue. "We shall convene in the tribunal chambers," she said, her tone unyielding. "Let the station authorities be summoned. This matter is to be settled with all due formality." And so began the strangest, most harrowing day of Lucas Vance's life. Deep beneath Zenith Prime's bustling promenade lay a restricted sector where the Galactic Tribunal had established its local seat. Ornate corridors gave way to a grand chamber lined with cosmic tapestries, each depicting scenes of interstellar justice and monumental rulings from eons past. Beneath the tall, arching ceiling stood a central podium, ringed by stone benches carved in swirling alien patterns. Lucas stood at the center of this imposing arena, dwarfed by the architecture, overshadowed by the majesty of a legal tradition older than Earth's recorded history. Before him, High Judge Seraphis presided on an elevated dais, flanked by two lesser judges. A circle of robed clerks looked on with detached curiosity, scribbling notes on glowing data slates. He swallowed hard, acutely aware of how small and insignificant he must appear. Only hours ago, he had been a simple technician, minding his own business. Now, an unintentional brush of his hand had thrust him into a nightmare. A clerk with reptilian features and elongated fingers stepped forward, reading from a glowing script. "We gather in the matter of High Judge Seraphis of the Zerathi Dominion versus Lucas Vance, human. The charge, unauthorized contact, tantamount to a formal union proposal, under Zerathi custom. The defendant has two choices, to honor the union or to face the tribunal's judgment." Lucas's voice emerged shaky but determined. I'm sorry. It was an accident. I didn't know about your customs." Seraphis inclined her head, her expression icy. "Ignorance is no excuse in matters of interspecies protocol. The customs of my people hold that physical contact, initiated in public, is a vow of deepest commitment. To break that vow is a grave offense. Your Honor," he ventured, trying to maintain composure, "is there truly no other path?" Seraphis's stern visage softened just a fraction, though her tone remained formal. "If you refuse to proceed with our union, the punishment is typically severe. In some cases, the offending party can be executed. However, as a High Judge, I might exercise leniency. But rest assured, the tribunal does not regard this lightly." He felt a cold sweat break out along his brow. The entire hall seemed to close in on him. Looking around, he noticed the watchers, the scribes, the guards. Their stares were not hostile, merely clinical. They seemed fascinated, as though this was a rare scenario. One of the lesser judges, a spindly alien with an elongated skull, rose to speak in a reedy voice. The defendant could plead for an official trial. However, given the clarity of the evidence, such a process might be unproductive. The law is explicit. Lucas took a trembling breath. He was a technician, not some ambassador skilled in diplomacy. Yet, in the face of dire consequences, he found a kernel of resolve. I don't want to die, he said, the frankness of his words echoing in the cavernous chamber. But marriage? That's not something I don't even know you. Seraphis's expression remained impassive. It is not a trivial matter for me either, human. Yet my society dictates that your contact is a direct challenge to the sanctity of my personal space. I hold a position of high responsibility. If I ignore this custom, I undermine the very tradition that maintains order. If you spurn the union, it is tantamount to an insult of cosmic proportions. Lucas's mind whirled. This was madness, yet he couldn't deny the gravity of what lay before him. Sensing a flicker of compassion in Seraphis's rigid bearing, he decided to speak more gently. High Judge Seraphis, he said, I never intended disrespect. Please, is there truly no room for negotiation, no lesser ceremony, no apology that could mend this slight without the extremes of marriage or death? Seraphis regarded him for a moment, her violet eyes reflecting swirling thoughts. At length, she answered, the old laws of the Zerathi are absolute in this regard. However, I will request a recess to consider if any alternative path might exist. But do not hope for too much. The laws were designed to prevent casual contact that might dishonor one's rank and lineage. With a wave of her hand, she dismissed the hearing. Lucas's heart thundered. He was led away under the watchful eye of guards, uncertain whether he would emerge from this ordeal alive or bound in an unthinkable union. Yet deep beneath his fear stirred a flicker of curiosity. He wondered who Seraphis truly was, beyond the imposing title of High Judge. Could it be that beneath her formidable exterior lay an individual as lonely, as burdened by duty, as he sometimes felt? While waiting in a side chamber, Lucas paced about. The walls were lined with archaic symbols, presumably Zerathi in origin, reminiscent of serpentine patterns etched into obsidian-like material. An attendant in flowing robes brought him a cup of water, but he was too anxious to drink. He stood pondering the cosmic joke that had befallen him. Marriage to a terrifying alien judge, or face an interstellar tribunal that might sentence him to death. Fate has a twisted sense of humor, he murmured. Before long, the door slid open with a soft hiss. A slender woman wearing the uniform of Zenith Prime's local authority, a navy blue jacket with silver epaulets, entered. She introduced herself as Commander Melina Rhodes, the station's liaison with the tribunal. She offered a sympathetic nod. Mr. Vance, the situation is dire. The Zerathi Dominion's customs are well documented, if rarely invoked. Touching a member of their ruling caste, it's a binding proposal. If broken, the consequences are indeed severe. But we're trying to see if there's a legal nuance that can help. Lucas's voice was a near whisper. And if there isn't? She hesitated. Seraphis is known for her strict adherence to the law. However, she's also reputed to be honorable. If she sees merit in a compromise, she might allow it. I've seen her oversee complex disputes, and she's known to consider mitigating factors. But you did, in effect, propose in front of half the station. He dropped into a chair and buried his head in his hands. I never asked for this. I just wanted to fix a conduit, do my job, and maybe one day move on to the next contract. Commander Rhodes laid a hand on his shoulder. Don't give up hope. We'll do everything in our power. In the meantime, try to keep your composure. The tribunal seldom respects desperation, but they do respect dignity. Lucas nodded, though the swirl of his anxiety threatened to overwhelm him. He heard a distant gong reverberating in the corridors. Wordlessly, the commander led him back into the main hall. He re-entered the chamber to find Seraphis standing in quiet consultation with her fellow judges. She turned when she heard his approach, her expression as unreadable as the depths of space. With an inclination of her head, she gestured for the court to reconvene. This is no trivial matter, she began, her voice filling the hall. I have meditated on the question of whether leniency is possible, yet the Zerathi Dominion's laws bind even me. Should I let the slight pass, I would undermine our sacred traditions, set a dangerous precedent, and risk censure from my own people. Still, I acknowledge the union, if accepted under duress, hardly befits our ancient rites. Lucas tried to speak, but his throat felt painfully dry. He forced himself to swallow, then managed. I never intended any insult. If you're bound by your laws, and I can't merely break them without risk to my life, I don't see another path. A murmur rippled through the assembled robed figures, some of them exchanging pointed glances. Seraphis considered him a moment longer, then raised one graceful hand. Let it be known, she declared, that as High Judge, I will not condemn a man to death for an accidental gesture. Thus, I choose to accept the union, albeit on a provisional basis. We shall observe the customary engagement rituals for a set duration. Let us say no more than a cycle of your station's standard time, to see if the union can be consummated in sincerity. Lucas blinked in disbelief. A trial engagement, he managed. Her voice was grave, but there was a subtle undercurrent of mercy. Yes, a period in which you must prove, beyond all doubt, that you do not intend to dishonor this union. Should you remain steadfast and truly accept what you have initiated, we will proceed with the formal binding. If, however, you betray our vow, I will have no choice but to invoke the penalty. A swirl of conflicting emotions seized Lucas. Relief that he would not be executed on the spot mingled with fear at the near impossibility of living up to this alien courtship. How long is a Zerathi engagement period? He asked, voice cracking. 1 month by your station's measurement, Seraphis replied. You will submit to certain rites, learn the duties expected of you, and partake in ceremonies designed to affirm your commitment. A strange hush settled over the chamber. Lucas felt the eyes of the crowd upon him, the weight of cosmic tradition pressing on his shoulders. The robed clerks scribbled furiously, documenting every word. Commander Rhodes, standing nearby, gave him a slight nod of encouragement. He exhaled shakily, then gave a nod of his own. I don't see any other way. I accept. The High Judge lowered her hand. Then it is settled. We shall begin the engagement rites immediately. Let all bear witness. And so the ruling was declared, setting Lucas on a path he could never have imagined. He was now bound, albeit provisionally, to High Judge Seraphis of the Zerathi Dominion. The cosmic tapestry of the Andromeda Passage seemed to shudder with the gravity of this new reality. A station technician, once lost among the billions drifting through space, had become the unlikely fiancé to one of the galaxy's most formidable figures. Over the next few days, Lucas's life changed drastically. The Tribune assigned him temporary quarters near the Zerathi Enclave on Zenith Prime, an area reserved for visiting dignitaries. Gone were his modest bunk and the typical routine of calibrating conduits. Instead, he was fitted with ceremonial garments, simple tunics that displayed no rank but were meant to show humility before Zerathi tradition. Seraphis herself was busy overseeing a critical case regarding a territorial dispute between two neighboring star systems. Yet, in between hearings, she delegated time to this newly forged engagement, sending instructions through her attendants. Lucas found himself besieged by a string of official documents. Each scroll or data slate described the intricacies of Zerathi courtship etiquette. How to greet Seraphis in private, how to properly address her in public, how to show deference without groveling, and how to signal willingness to proceed with the union. It was both bewildering and disconcerting. Lucas studied the materials by night, determined to avoid any further misstep. He learned that the Zerathi, though proud and rigid in their traditions, valued sincerity above flattery. Grand gestures meant little if not backed by genuine intent. They also placed strong emphasis on telepathic resonance in intimate bonds, though not all Zerathi possessed telepathic power. But in the highest echelons, like Seraphis's lineage, touch and emotional connection were deeply entwined. Ironically, the very act that had landed him in this predicament, physical touch, was a sacred, rarely bestowed privilege in Zerathi culture. Married couples among the Zerathi formed a deep psychic link through repeated contact, reinforcing trust and harmony. The notion intrigued Lucas, though it also terrified him. One afternoon, while reading an elaborate scroll describing the rite of shared reflection, he heard a polite knock at his chamber door. It slid open to reveal one of Seraphis's attendants, a slim Zerathi female named Orlana. Her skin bore a softer shade of lavender, and her demeanor was gentler than Seraphis's imposing presence. I have come to escort you, she said softly. The High Judge requests your presence in the Arboretum. Lucas set aside the scroll, heart thudding. He followed Orlana through winding corridors lit by luminous vines that pulsed with a faint, otherworldly glow. The Arboretum, located deep within the Seraphis enclave, was a curious place. It simulated a small forest, complete with towering trees grown from seeds collected on distant worlds. Exotic birds, imported from the Seraphis homeworld, fluttered among the branches, their calls reverberating in the enclosed air. Near the center of this tranquil place stood Seraphis. She wore a more relaxed robe of soft black fabric, though it still bore the insignia of her station. Her arms were folded across her chest, her posture statuesque. When she turned, Lucas glimpsed an intense vulnerability in her eyes, if only for a fleeting second. "You came," she said simply. Lucas managed a small bow, recalling the protocol. "You summoned me, Your Honor." She waved a hand. "Here, in private, you may address me without formality. I wanted to see how you fare with the engagement rites. Orlana tells me you've studied diligently." He glanced around, noticing how the filtered sunlight cast dappled patterns on the ground. "I'm trying to avoid further insults," he said, voice tinged with awkwardness. "Though I must confess, it's overwhelming." Seraphis nodded, pacing a step or two. Her expression remained stern, but her tone grew thoughtful. "It is no small thing, what we undertake. My position demands strict adherence to tradition. Yet I cannot ignore that you are forced into this. Such compulsion is not how my people intend these unions to be." Lucas breathed out slowly, trying to gather courage. "May I ask, do you truly want this union yourself? I realize you're bound by the law. But how do you feel?" A flicker of something, was it sadness, crossed her face. She turned her gaze to a rare white blossom, gently brushing its petal with a violet fingertip. "For centuries, I have upheld the laws of the Seraphis. I have presided over countless trials, forging alliances, settling disputes. My dedication to duty left little room for personal connections. Our custom states I must respond to a public touch with either rejection or acceptance, but I have never been touched before, thus never bound." She paused, letting silence fill the air. A small bird fluttered overhead, its soft chirp echoing. "In truth, I never thought to marry, for I am wedded to the law, to my calling. Yet, here I stand, confronted by a man who had no intention of offering me a vow, and no means to retract it." Lucas's throat tightened with empathy. "This is a predicament for you as much as for me." She turned back to him, her gaze piercing yet not unkind. "Yes, and so we find ourselves entangled by a custom that was meant to preserve dignity. You asked if I want this union. The honest answer is that I do not know you well enough to say, but I am compelled to give you a chance, since the alternative would be your undoing, and that does not sit well with me." He looked at her, wrestling with conflicting emotions. She was regal, distant, and formidable, yet also, in that moment, heartbreakingly sincere. She could have chosen to remain impassive and let the law crush him. Instead, she offered him a narrow path to survival, all the while caught in her own sense of duty. "I appreciate your mercy, truly," he said, voice quiet. "I'll do my best to honor your customs." She held his gaze. "Very well. I wish for us to undertake the first step of the rite of shared reflection. We must exchange tokens, objects that carry personal significance, so that we may begin to understand each other's essence. Do you have something that represents who you are?" Lucas blinked. He had not anticipated such a request. Rummaging mentally through his possessions, he realized most of what he owned was purely utilitarian. Tools, uniforms, manuals. Then he remembered a small, tarnished gear pendant he wore around his neck, tucked beneath his shirt. It was given to him by his late grandfather, a mechanical genius back on Earth. The gear was from a vintage watch, once a cherished heirloom. He slowly fished it out and held it up, the faint glint of metal catching the Arboretum's soft light. "This belonged to my grandfather. It's a reminder of where I come from, and why I chose to become a station technician. He taught me how to fix things, how to look for solutions when others see chaos. This is the only object I own that carries deep meaning." Seraphis regarded the small gear, then nodded solemnly. She reached up and removed a slender metal band from her left wrist. Lucas could see it was engraved with alien script. "This band was bestowed upon me when I took my oath to become a judge. These words are from the Seraphis High Law, proclaiming justice as the utmost virtue. It is tied to my identity, to the duty that shaped me. She extended the band. Gently, Lucas took it. We exchange these tokens now, to mark the first step, Seraphis said quietly, placing his gear pendant in the palm of her hand. Keep it near. Learn of it, as I shall learn of your gear. And remember the vow you have made. For a moment, their hands touched. The contact was light, yet electric. She quickly withdrew, leaving him standing there with her band, a symbol of her entire life's work. He felt an odd mixture of awe, fear, and a curious sense of closeness. Perhaps, in that small gesture, they bridged the gulf between them, if only by a fraction. Over the ensuing weeks, Lucas's life oscillated between surreal ceremonial lessons and moments of mundane station existence. Each day, he reported to the Seraphis enclave for instructions on the next phase of the engagement. At night, he sometimes found solace in his old haunts, Iggy's cafe, where he would sip coffee and brood, ignoring the stares of curious onlookers. Rumors had spread like wildfire across Zenith Prime. The story of a human technician accidentally proposing to a high judge of the Galactic tribunal was too sensational to be contained. Some found it humorous, some pitied Lucas, others eyed him with envy, imagining the influence he might wield if the union became official. Commander Rhodes checked in on him periodically, offering moral support. Rebecca Helion, his fellow technician, cornered him once at the cafe and demanded details. Are you serious, Lucas? You're actually going through with it? What if she's a monster behind closed doors? He shrugged, swirling the coffee in his cup. I don't know what she's like in private. So far, she's been formal, distant, but not unkind. She's bound by tradition. It's not like she singled me out to torment me. Rebecca studied him, then leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Maybe she's lonely. High judges have it rough. Think about it. Always having to be impartial, never letting your guard down. Maybe that's why the Seraphis are so strict about touch. It's the only way they can safeguard their emotions. He stared into his coffee. Could be. In any case, I don't really have a choice. She put a hand on his shoulder. Hey, if you do end up married to the scariest alien on the station, promise me you won't forget your old friends. He gave a dry laugh. I'll try my best. Despite his attempts at humor, dread remained an undercurrent in his daily life. The rite of shared reflection demanded that he present small offerings over several sessions, each symbolizing facets of his life, his aspirations, regrets, and loyalties. Seraphis reciprocated, offering glimpses into her own past. Though she didn't share personal stories in detail, she revealed a lonely childhood, shaped by the rigid system that groomed her to become a judge from a young age. Sometimes, as they stood side by side, performing a ritual gesture or reciting the vow, Lucas caught fleeting glimpses of vulnerability behind her regal mask. He sensed that, beneath the imposing rank, Seraphis was as mortal as any. She carried burdens he could scarcely fathom. On the station's day that marked the halfway point of their engagement, Seraphis invited Lucas to a private dinner in her quarters, a gesture that signified a step toward mutual understanding. Nervous, he arrived at the appointed time, wearing a plain but neatly pressed tunic. A pair of Seraphis guards stood watch outside her door, their expressions impassive. When he entered, he found the quarters spacious yet austere. Books lined shelves, data slates stacked neatly, and a small table set with a simple meal. Seraphis stood near a window that looked out on the swirling cosmic tapestry beyond the station. She turned as he approached, her features etched with an unreadable calm. "Thank you for coming," she said, motioning to a seat at the table. He sat, swallowing anxiety. A gentle, golden light emanated from tall lamps in the corners, giving the room an intimate ambience. He noticed the absence of decoration, no personal mementos, no indulgent artwork. The place reflected her disciplined nature. Seraphis took a seat across from him. An attendant brought in covered dishes alien cuisine, by the look of it. Aromas both enticing and strange wafted through the air. Once the attendant departed, Seraphis spoke softly. "I asked my staff to prepare something suitable for a human palate, though we have included some Seraphis delicacies for variety." Lucas offered a polite smile. "Thank you. I'm open to trying new things." They ate in relative silence at first. Lucas sampled the dishes, some of which were tangy and sweet, others with a mild bitterness reminiscent of earth vegetables. Seraphis watched him closely, occasionally bowing her head to partake of her own meal. Finally, she broke the quiet. "You have studied diligently," she observed. "Orlando reports that you have passed the rite of shared reflection with no missteps. Has it been taxing on you? He considered her question. It's challenging, yes, he admitted, but I'm learning a great deal about your people, your beliefs. It's fascinating, in a way, how different our cultures can be. She inclined her head. I trust you harbor no resentment. You must understand, the customs that bind us are ancient. They serve as the foundation of Zerathi society. He set down his fork with a soft clang. I won't lie. I wish I wasn't forced into this situation. But I don't resent you specifically. You could have chosen to demand my punishment, but you gave me this chance. A flicker of gentleness passed over her features. It would dishonor my position to wield the law as a bludgeon, especially against an unintentional offense. Yet, I cannot dismiss the law altogether. This is the path we must walk. Silence returned, yet it felt a shade more comfortable now. As they resumed their meal, Lucas found his gaze lingering on her face. He realized he had never truly seen her, beyond the imposing robe and the formal stance. Up close, her violet skin possessed subtle undertones of rose and lavender. A faint luminescence shimmered along her temples, likely a Zerathi trait. He thought her beautiful, in an ethereal way, though terrifying in her authority. After dinner, she rose and beckoned him to the window. Outside, the cosmic panorama stretched vast and resplendent. A starfield twinkled with a mesmerizing brilliance, the rotating rim of the station occasionally eclipsing the view. Seraphis clasped her hands behind her back, her gaze distant. You asked once what I want, she said quietly. I have lived under oath, defining myself by the law, by my duties. I had not questioned it until now. Perhaps this is an opportunity for both of us to see a broader view of life. Lucas hesitated, then nodded. I'd like to think so. They stood there for a time, wordless. For the first instance, Lucas sensed a kinship in the silence, an unspoken understanding that they were both participants in a drama none of them had written. Yet, together, maybe they could transform it into something meaningful. As the final days of the engagement period approached, the sense of tension on Zenith Prime rose. Some of the station's denizens placed bets on whether Lucas would go through with the union or find a way to slip out of it. Others whispered rumors of hidden crises that might overshadow the wedding. Yet for Lucas and Seraphis, the momentum seemed inexorable. She had completed her major judicial hearings, finding time to carefully observe Lucas's progress in fulfilling the ceremonial requirements. Each step had concluded successfully, from the exchange of personal tokens to the vow recitations. The last phase, known as the rite of heart's affirmation, loomed. It would entail an intimate acknowledgement between them, touching foreheads, symbolically merging two spirits in a sign of trust. One evening, Lucas received a summons for the rite to take place the following day. His chest tightened at the thought. The station's gossipers were in a frenzy, anticipating the formal ceremony that would seal his fate. Commander Rhodes visited him that night, urging him to remain resolute. If you see any sign of doubt on her part, she advised, or if you sense an opening to renegotiate, do so. But if you truly believe there's no other way, then do what you must. He thanked her and tried to quell the tremor in his hands. Did he truly have a choice? In the weeks since this ordeal began, he had come to see Seraphis as more than a fearsome judge. She was principled, lonely, burdened by responsibilities. He suspected she felt the same cautious curiosity toward him. But was that enough to forge a genuine union? The next morning, the time arrived. Lucas stood in the same grand chamber where the tribunal had first convened. Now, however, the atmosphere was not one of accusation, but of solemn ritual. The dais was draped in flowing black and gold banners. The benches were occupied by various dignitaries, humans, Zerathi, and ambassadors from other species. Word of the union had evidently piqued widespread interest. At the far end of the chamber, Seraphis stood tall, adorned in formal attire that radiated quiet splendor. She wore layered robes of midnight blue, embroidered with luminous threads that evoked stars in a night sky. The metal band Lucas had given her was secured around her wrist, a testament to the exchange of tokens. As Lucas walked toward her, heart pounding, he clutched the gear pendant beneath his tunic, her gift in return. A hush fell. The presiding official, a Zerathi elder with a milky white complexion, raised a staff that glowed with arcs of energy. Gathered witnesses, the elder intoned, we are here to observe the final rite of heart's affirmation between High Judge Seraphis of the Zerathi Dominion and Lucas Vance, a human technician of Zenith Prime. Let the vow be spoken. Seraphis's voice was steady but resonant with emotion. By the laws of my ancestors, and by my own free will, I stand before you to unite with the one who has made the vow of contact. I shall honor him, protect him, and recognize him as my mate. All eyes turned to Lucas. His mouth had gone dry. He had memorized the vow, but the weight of the moment nearly paralyzed him. Mustering courage, he spoke, voice echoing faintly. By the ties of the vow I inadvertently made, but now willingly affirm, I stand to unite with you, Seraphis. I shall honor you, respect your customs, and recognize you as my mate. There was a soft ripple of reaction in the crowd, a few gasps, murmurs. The elder then directed them to perform the symbolic gesture. Lucas and Seraphis faced each other. She slowly lifted a hand, placing it gently against his forehead. Following her cue, he raised his hand to touch her forehead in turn, matching the gesture. In Zerathi tradition, this signified the bridging of two minds, two destinies. The contact sent a subtle warmth coursing through Lucas, stirring feelings of awe and vulnerability. He saw Seraphis's eyes flutter shut for a moment, as though she too felt an unexpected sensation. Then, the elder's staff crackled with energy, signaling the rite's completion. It is done, the elder proclaimed. By law and custom, you are bound. May the union bring prosperity and wisdom to both your peoples. A wave of applause, mixed with stunned silence, swept through the chamber. The swirl of official onlookers stepped forward to congratulate them. Commander Rhodes approached, offering a handshake to Lucas and a polite nod to Seraphis. Rebecca, in the back, gave Lucas a broad grin and a thumbs up. Seraphis seemed composed, yet a hint of emotion glimmered in her eyes. She tilted her head and said softly, "Well, husband, I suppose we have embarked on a journey neither of us expected." Lucas exhaled, still caught between disbelief and relief. "Yes, wife," he murmured, trying the term for the first time. "I guess we have." In the days that followed, life took on a strange equilibrium. Lucas was officially recognized as consort to the High Judge of the Zerathi Dominion. Though he still performed station duties, his station supervisors treated him with newfound deference. Rebecca teased him mercilessly whenever they crossed paths, while Commander Rhodes did her best to help him navigate this new status. Seraphis continued her judicial responsibilities, but now, for the first time, she had someone to return to at the day's end. Their shared quarters had been prepared, though in practice, she and Lucas occupied adjacent rooms within the same suite. Zerathi custom did not demand immediate cohabitation. Indeed, the Zerathi believed that respect for personal space was paramount. Oddly, an unspoken camaraderie began to blossom between them. Lucas discovered that Seraphis had a subtle sense of humor, evident in the wry remarks she occasionally made. She, in turn, seemed surprised when Lucas invited her to sample Earth cuisine. One evening, he insisted on cooking pancakes, having found some battered flour and a portable griddle in the station's commissary. Seraphis observed curiously as he mixed the batter. "Pancakes," he explained, flipping one with a spatula, "are a simple but beloved Earth dish. Typically eaten at breakfast, but good any time of day. I used to make these with my grandfather on weekends." She watched, arms folded, eyebrows arched. "You revolve the batter, then cook it on a heated surface, correct?" He chuckled. "Essentially, yes. Nothing fancy, but delicious." When the pancakes were done, he drizzled a bit of syrup, an import from Earth's maple trees, over them. Seraphis eyed the glistening sweetness with cautious curiosity. She picked up a fork and gingerly took a bite. Her expression changed from guarded to mildly enchanted. "This is pleasingly soft," she said, swallowing. "A curious flavor, both sweet and savory." Lucas grinned. "I'm glad you like it." They ate in near silence, broken only by the quiet hiss of the station's ventilation and the gentle clink of cutlery. At length, Seraphis spoke in a subdued tone. "Lucas, I have spent centuries upholding the Zerathi Code. My entire life revolved around the law, ensuring justice across the galaxy. Yet, I now find myself sharing a meal with a man from Earth, eating pancakes, feeling odd, uncertain, but not in a negative way." He considered her words. "I know what you mean. My life was, well, ordinary, and now it's anything but. Yet, if there's one thing I've learned in these past weeks, it's that life rarely goes as we plan." She nodded, setting her fork down. "Indeed. I see now that the old law, this tradition that forced us into marriage, carries a dual nature. It ensures respect for our personal boundaries, but it also compels a closeness neither of us was prepared for. Perhaps that is the paradox of the Zerathi Code." Lucas tilted his head. "What do you intend to do now, Seraphis? It might be that we remain bound by law, fulfilling ceremonial duties. But do you see a genuine future for us? Silence stretched, and he feared he had overstepped by asking so bluntly. Then she fixed him with a thoughtful gaze. We are bonded in the eyes of the galaxy. The question of sincerity remains, but let us explore. If our union grows in truth, then let the galaxy see it was not merely the law that forced our hand. If it does not, we will face that challenge when the time comes. Her words offered a glimmer of possibility. Lucas felt an unexpected warmth in his chest. Perhaps, through this bizarre twist of fate, they could find real companionship. He finished his pancake, smiling inwardly at the strangeness of the moment, sharing a simple Earth breakfast food with a near-immortal alien judge who now called him husband. A day later, as they strolled along a private observation deck, gazing at the swirling cosmos, Seraphis turned to him. Lucas, she began, a rare softness in her voice. You must have some dream of your own, something you aspire to, beyond technical work. Tell me of it. He hesitated, eyes roaming the stars outside. I'd always thought of traveling beyond the station. I wanted to see more worlds. Fix bigger things than station conduits, maybe terraformers, starships, or entire planetary grids. My grandfather used to say, never let your world become too small. She tilted her head, absorbing his words. Then perhaps I can assist. My position grants me access to many corners of the galaxy. In time, we could venture further, if you wish. He blinked in surprise. You'd do that for me? A slight smile curved her lips. If we are to remain partners, should we not share in one another's pursuits? The galaxy is wide, and it holds wonders I have yet to witness. I might pass judgment on many worlds, but that does not mean I have truly seen them. Suddenly, Lucas laughed, a genuine, warm sound that seemed to fill the observation deck. You know, for someone who threatened me with an execution a month ago, you're remarkably thoughtful. She arched an eyebrow. Careful, husband. I may yet reconsider. He grinned, shaking his head. I'll take my chances. Their banter echoed amid the hush of the station corridors, a sign that they were no longer two strangers forced together by a draconian custom, but two individuals forging a new connection. And as the swirling stars bore silent witness, they continued down the deck, side by side, stepping into a future shaped by both duty and choice, bound by law, yet finding genuine warmth in the unlikeliest of unions. Not long after, the station's rumor mill quieted. The improbable union, sealed initially by an accidental touch and threatened by lethal consequences, settled into a new normal. High Judge Seraphis concluded her business on Zenith Prime, but instead of departing alone, she invited Lucas to accompany her on official tours of neighboring systems. Station personnel looked on with wonder as the pair left the docking bay together, bound for the cosmos in a sleek Zerathi cruiser. In the months that followed, accounts trickled back of the formidable judge and her human mate arbitrating disputes between warring factions, negotiating treaties, and, on quieter days, simply discovering the joys of companionship. Word spread of a certain Earth delicacy the High Judge had grown fond of, rumored to be a type of flat, round bread made from batter and topped with sweet syrup. Ambassadors and dignitaries alike found it amusing, yet oddly endearing, to see an ancient Zerathi tradition blend with something as humble as a pancake. As for Lucas Vance, he still fixed things, engines, power grids, or entire legal frameworks when needed. But his greatest repair job, perhaps, was mending the unintentional rift caused by his wayward hand that fateful day on Zenith Prime. In doing so, he found a life far more expansive than his old routine of calibrating conduits, one filled with starbound travel, cultural discovery, and the cautious yet genuine affection of a being once so distant and unapproachable. And Seraphis, once solitary behind the austere walls of her regal chambers, now walked the halls of galactic power with a confidant who saw her not merely as a high judge, but as a person. Together, they forged a bond that transcended the initial threat of law, evolving into something deeply personal, something that even the ancient Zerathi code had not quite anticipated. In the grand tapestry of cosmic fate, their union became the whispered legend of Zenith Prime, a love story that began with fear and ended with quiet devotion, sealed over the gentle sweetness of batter and syrup. And so it was that the law which once condemned became the law that blessed, reminding every observer, from humans to Zerathi elders, that life's strangest turns could sometimes lead to the greatest joys. With every star they passed, every treaty they brokered, and every pancake they shared, Lucas and Seraphis affirmed that destiny need not be a prison of tradition. It could be the spark igniting a future brighter than any star, born of chance, yet tempered by choice. And in that future, they stood side by side, at peace with the path that had brought them together, and eager to discover every hidden corner of the galaxy, hand in hand.